Good morning again, folks, as you're trickling in, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Definitely, if you feel so obliged, introduce yourself in the chat. But there's a lot of chats coming in, so I don't know that people will be seeing that, but we're going to be talking about preparing and planning for organizational change. I hope that some of you were able to, or all of you were able to watch the videos of our participants where they introduced themselves a little bit and gave themselves a little snippet of what they were going to be sharing. So please feel free to think of questions that you are wanting to ask of the panelists. And definitely if you're asking questions, please use the Q&A versus the chat so that we can actually get to your questions. And then I'll do more logistical things as folks stream in. And so we'll start in about two minutes. Wow, I love that everyone is all over. That's amazing to see. Oh, and there is a link for transcription, I believe, here. Where someone, I am blanking on the name, had a suggestion for a solution to our closed captioning issue. And so we are trying that out right now in real time. And so that link, I believe, is what should take you to the transcription. And if you're having issues with that, definitely ping the Q&A and we will try and problem solve and troubleshoot that for you all. Oops, I'm muted. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started because I want to spend as much time as possible with these beautiful, wonderful, talented, really gracious panelists that we have in front of us. I wanted to first introduce myself. So my name is Ozzy Alosium. I'm not sure I did that actually. No, I did say where I work. I'm obviously with Denver Public Library as a communications, or the community connections program coordinator. I blinked on my job title for a second. And so what that means is that I am helping with this symposium and helping with some other projects that I'll share later on day 3. And my pronouns are she, her, and hers. So I wanted to just let you all know that we do have some moderators that will be moderating the chat to the best of their ability. We have we've reached our capacity on the Zoom, so we're at 1,000, and we have folks on YouTube, and there aren't, I don't believe right now, folks on the YouTube monitoring the chat. We can definitely get someone on that if that is a concern of folks feel free to reach out to me about that, and I'll definitely make sure that we get that handled. And what that means is that as questions are coming in for the panelists, they will be copying and pasting them and putting them in a separate document so that we can get to those after we ask the panelists a set of scripted questions. So if you have questions versus comments, please definitely use the Q&A. And if they're logistical questions, technical questions of those things, definitely ask those, and we'll answer those privately in real time. One thing I did want to let you all know is that we will be utilizing a tool called progressive stacking. And so I spoke to that a bit in the welcome. And what that means is if you identify as a racially or ethnically marginalized group and would like to ask a question, and if you self-choose, please use an asterisk before your question or comment, and we'll make sure to prioritize that when we are doing our Q&A with the audience. Let's see, as a reminder, all of the sessions will be recorded and they will live on our symposium site after the symposium, and also on our YouTube page, which is the Denver Public Library YouTube. So definitely look out for that, and those will also have the closed captioning on it. It is going to be easier for you to see all the panelists if they are in gallery view versus speaker view. So definitely make sure you switch to that. It should be in the top right hand of your corner. And that way you'll be able to see everyone on screen as we're engaging conversation. I think that's really it on my end. So without further ado, I will go ahead and introduce, or let themselves introduce themselves, our panelists, and we'll go ahead and start up in the top corner with Ms. Twanna Hodge.
Hi, good afternoon or good morning or good day, wherever you are at. My name is Twanna Hodge. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am currently working at the University of Florida, and I am their very first ever diversity, equity, and inclusion librarian, and I've been in my current position for about 5 months. The lovely virtual background that you see is from John Brewers Bay Beach on St. Thomas, the U.S. Virgin Islands, which I was born and raised. Thank you.
And we will go over to Julia.
Great, thank you so much. Happy Wednesday, everybody. My name is Julia Alvarez. My pronouns are she, her. I identify as a mestiza Filipina American, cisgendered woman, and I am the CEO and founder of Point B Strategies. We are a local organizational development and capacity building consultancy based here in Denver, Colorado. Our work centers around partnering with nonprofits and grant-making organizations, as well as city and state agencies, to help them ask and answer hard questions that might be getting in the way of them making progress towards their programmatic or financial or organizational goals. As you might imagine, a lot of our work over the last several months in particular has really centered around equity and inclusion and helping our organizational partners really do deep and intentional organizational assessments around their approach to equity and how they are showing up in, with, and for their communities. In addition to some of our equity and inclusion work, we also do grant writing and strategic planning and evaluation, all of which is very grounded in equity and grounded in a goal of essentially attempting to decolonize the work of the nonprofit sector and the philanthropic sector. So very honored, very humbled to be here today with these fantastic panelists and all of you out in the virtual world. So looking forward to this conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, Julia. We'll hand it over to Dr. Cerise Hunt.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Cerise Hunt. I'm the director of the Center for Public Health Practice, which is in the Colorado School of Public Health at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus. And also within the School of Public Health, I am an assistant professor. And the center, our whole mission is excellence in practice. So whatever arena, we want to support the work that's being done at a practice level, ensuring that theory, because we have all these different theories around equity, diversity, inclusion, cultural humility, all these different theories. But the struggle is, well, how do we really translate it to practice? And so I work with a team of folks, well, that's our job. We help organizations really look at their equity, diversity, inclusion mission. And when I say organizations, we're looking at local, state government, community-based organizations, academic institutions, associations, and we offer EDI consultation, advanced training, and technical assistance for their entire organization. And not only do we provide this, our whole mission with individuals is to really lead them to that organizational change. So this topic is near and dear. My research focuses around organizational change as it relates to equity. So I just thank you for allowing me to engage and learn from all of you today.
Thank you so much, Cerise. And we will, lastly but not least, we'll hand it over to Michelle, who will introduce herself.
Great. Hi, thanks for having me here today. I'm Michelle Jeske. I'm the city librarian or the director of the Denver Public Library, and I identify as she, her, hers. I think most of you know what a public library is, but our mission at DPL is to create welcoming spaces where all are free to explore and connect. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So let's proceed.
Awesome. Okay, so the panelists in front of you were chosen because they work in different sectors. Some are in the academy, some are for public institutions, some are in the nonprofit space, and they are all at different points in their EDI journey themselves and where their organizations are. And so we wanted to offer a variety of perspectives from people that are leading their organizations to people who are in more staff level roles and are trying to implement the work from that kind of vantage point. And so the first question that I have for the panel is, what kind of organization do you work for? What is your role within that organization? And where is your organization at in its EDI journey? And I'll put that in the chat for folks so you can know what question they are referring to. And whoever wants to go first can go ahead and jump in.
So I'll go first. Like I mentioned to you all, I've been in my position as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Librarian at the University of Florida. And it's a historically and traditionally predominantly white institution. It is a large public land grant research academic institution located in North Florida. And it's also located in the South. So all of those things influence the EDI work that can be done. Predominantly white institution, is different than a historically Black college and university versus an institution that has the designation of a Hispanic serving institution versus one that is a tribal college or university. And so being in this position, there's a lot of things that in the last 5 months that I've had the opportunity to do. And one of the roles is creating a comprehensive DEI program, helping team members to recognize, understand the differences and how they are important to our community mission, as well as working to kind of lead putting an action plan into place from our strategic directions. I would have to say that the University of Florida Libraries is kind of in its kind of immediate, kind of going into that immediate journey in regards to diversity, equity, inclusion. One of the reasons has been the creation and recruitment and then hiring of me in this position, as well as the work that many people have been doing before I got here to make sure that I was able to step in and help and collaborate and work with others to help move the organization forward. And I've been working with people and meeting them one-on-one to help them understand what my job entails, and that diversity is the work of everyone and not just the role of myself, just because I have DEI in my title. And so I will pass it along to the next panelist.
Maybe I'll follow since I'm also with the library. So as I mentioned, I'm the leader of our organization, and we are also just getting started on the journey. We've been much more intentional about this work for the last 3 years, but I think we have a really, really long way to go. And as far as where individuals are in our organization, we're about 700 staff. I think we have people on, in the what are we doing this for phase, and we have people on our team that are really have been leading us in this journey. We definitely have made some progress in the last 3 years. We have a phenomenal committee of devoted staff members who have provided learning opportunities, some of whom are on this symposium today. We're currently interviewing for an EDI manager position and really looking at how we can develop a team to coordinate and support the work. We recently got the results of a staff perception survey that really starts to show where we need to put some of our effort around including more perspectives, obviously diversifying our leadership, providing more targeted learning opportunities, really assessing internal and external policies and systems with a racial justice lens. So that's all really helpful because we know we have a lot more work to do, and it will really help us figure out where to start.
I can go next. Thank you both for those introductions. So as I mentioned, Point These Strategies is a consulting team based here in Denver, and we work primarily with nonprofits. I'd say 80 to 90% of our clients are nonprofit organizations, but essentially our goal is to work within the social change framework. So whether that's a nonprofit, a for-profit, a grant-making organization, a city, it doesn't matter to us as long as it's kind of all driving towards that social change kind of outcome. So in terms of where we are in our EDI, and I saw a question pop up, so I'll just say it too so that everybody hears it. When we throw around these words, EDI, equity, diversity, inclusion, you might hear us I often call it JEDI, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So that's what that saying means. So on our JEDI journey, I'd say that we have a unique perspective as consultants working in the social change sector and kind of serving as this bridge between philanthropy, nonprofits, and also city and state agencies, which really gives us a very unique perspective into this kind of trifecta of how white supremacy and privilege and social change all kind of converge in order to impact or lift up or support communities. And so as we as consultants approach this work, we very much acknowledge that we have a lot of work as individuals in order to get our heads wrapped around our own positionality and how we show up in, with, and for our work. We also have a role of helping our nonprofit organizations and our nonprofit partners see their role in partnering with and for communities, and also helping the philanthropic world look at equity from a different perspective and think differently about how they use their money and how they invest and what that power dynamic looks like. So I'd say that we are similarly in kind of an early stage of our JEDI journey. And also we're in this very unique privileged position to get to work with nonprofits that are really on the front line or on the community line, the community edge of doing this work, which really gives us a very interesting perspective into how equity efforts are really impacting and kind of trickling down to or reaching the community level.
And we just got a quick comment in that I should have stated up front. With the closed captioning, if you could speak as slowly as possible, that'd be very helpful. Not as slowly as possible, but slower.
Well, hello, I'm gonna try to speak slowly, but in regards to the question, I appreciate you framing it around journey. Because when I think, I'm going to speak to, because the center is part of the Colorado School of Public Health, so I'm going to speak to my organization and where we are as on this journey, because I follow suit with my organization. And it's been an interesting journey that has had its ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs. And so in that process, I just be mistaken to even not acknowledge that. But what's been great is we've done some great things throughout the years, you know, having like a climate survey where we're talking to faculty, staff, and students about their experience. And not only talking about it, but intentionally bringing the work to our executive committee to say, okay, what's going to be your plan? Within the school, we have an inclusive excellence committee there's a tri-chair model. And on there, all the associate deans, so institutional leadership, directors of HR, faculty, staff, and students all engage in this committee. And the committee has also been supporting the work to really assure that we're aligning, but it's a great mechanism to, you know, create accountability for our efforts. And then we just recently completed, the timing of this is perfect, we launched our 2020 Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Plan. And so we were actually in the implementation phase where we've taken all of our information, revamped, we're ready to prioritize this work. And then I just spoke and have been working with the dean and leadership now for, you know, because we had to pivot. You know, this whole climate of what's going on with COVID-19, all the injustice that's going on with Black bodies and folks of color. We've had to pivot our work to really reflect on where we are now. And now we have a whole plan that's about to be released. I guess I should be speaking to this on how we as a school are going to dismantle structural racism. So we've taken the commitment, our dean has made the commitment to, you know, dismantle structural racism and has pulled together a plan that's going to be released. In addition to that, we don't have dedicated leadership. So we will hire for an associate dean for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we're just on this path and seizing the opportunity to ensure that we are creating mechanisms for accountability in this work.
Awesome, thank you all for that. And it's good to see that you all are at different stages on your journey. And so speaking to that, because this symposium is specifically focused around workplace development, how has your organization promoted equity, diversity, and inclusion in workforce development? What initiatives or strategies, both formal and informal, has your organization employed? And I'll put that again in the chat box.
I can start with what we are up to. So our work and our approach is very focused on experiential learning and learning as we do, which is a wonderful thing to do when we work in the social change sector. So in addition to kind of continually learning from our client partners, we also are doing a lot of intentional work as an organization to build up our own both individual and kind of company-wide approach to JEDI work. So some of the things that we do, we offer professional development dollars for staff to attend specifically JEDI-based trainings. Shout out to one of our wonderful clients here in Denver, Building Bridges. They are hosting fantastic workshops always, and especially right now, that our staff attend on a fairly regular basis to help them understand their own identities and our own positionality in this work. So we do a lot of individualized training. We talk about JEDI work very regularly in our weekly staff meetings and have spent a lot of time this year, both prior to and during everything that's going on, working on kind of what our equity statement looks like and what our equity statement feels like in action, because we are very aware of the fact that posting an equity statement on a website only goes so far. So making sure that we have actionable approaches to how we want to show up in, with, and for our communities. And we also create space within our work for our own individual growth. So I'm hoping that some members of my staff are participating in the symposium this week. They are all offered time away from their clients, compensated by the company, to be here this week because this is important work to us. So we also acknowledge that, you know, different folks experience their own JEDI growth differently. And so we also make sure that we have space within our organization for personal approaches to this work. So whether that means that you take 3 hours on a Friday to read a book or listen to podcasts, and that's what you need for your growth and your journey, great. If it means that we are reading articles and things as a team, great. If it means that we are having really intentional, authentic conversations with our clients about this work, great. So as much as possible, we are trying to approach this with a lot of humility and with a lot of kind of space for our own both personal and organizational growth around Jedi.
I can go. This has been really helpful because getting ready for this, we've been starting to document what we've been doing. Similarly, we also have started with a lot of learning, and that's taken a number of different paths. Our HR team has done a lot of kind of very specific training on EDI concepts. Our executive team has engaged in a lot of different workshops, how to dialogue across difference, how to be an ally. And then we've been offering opportunities for leaders and supervisors around recruitment practices and inclusion and coaching. And then we've also been, and mostly staff-led, have been doing EDI and cultural humility training for staff. But we've also started to take some action, which feels really good. Ozzy could tell you more about this, but we've started some racial healing circles. We have hired some EDI-focused HR folks, a recruiter and a learning specialist. We have updated our HR policies and included calling out microaggressions. Equity has been named as one of our core values in our new strategic plan, and we're really starting to look at what metrics around that can look like. So that all feels really good, and yet we still have a lot of work to do.
So as we look at trainings similar to what's been stated, we intentionally ensure that as an organization, as those folks that are doing the work, that we engage in development. And so there's continual engagement ourselves, just to ensure that we are aware of our blind spots, our triggers as we engage in this work. And really taking time, and I appreciate even at the beginning for self-care, when we're thinking about racial battle fatigue and some of the different areas. So, you know, we offer different types of trainings. Now, the work that we do within the center and the work that we do with organizations to advance their equity, diversity, and inclusion work is we start with assessment and working to assess their needs. So we don't jump in and work with organizations. That consultation, we don't jump in thinking that we know the answers. And when we talk about assessment, we're looking at the entire workload, the workforce, from frontline all the way to senior leadership. Typically, I'm just gonna let you know that I really need leadership, executive leadership support in engaging in this type of work. That's one of our core values, is to have executive leadership, those folks that can make decisions, that can bring about change. Because, you know, if we don't have their buy-in in this process, it can make the work that we're doing, because I don't want to produce anything that's surface. I really want to make sure that the work that we do is really promoting change and is advancing change. So I engage with folks that are really to go on this long-standing journey, because to be honest, we're never going to get to the point that we arrive. It's always going to be in the trenches, you know, doing the work. I mean, I think we'll have equitable things in place, but it's just ever evolving, it's ever changing. And so we work with folks to assess. From there, we look and kind of develop, well, what's needed? Is there leadership training that needs to be in place, workforce, you know, and that gives us strategic ways to really begin engaging with folks, because we know to really push organizational change, there has to be organizational learning. So someone in the chat had talked about, you have to put the money in workforce development and training and really prioritize, because a lot of folks, we hear these terms like equity. Well, how does that apply to me? You know, I'm the finance person. What do you mean I have to do things in equitable? Well, you need to really be doing things in equitable. You're over the coins, you're over the money. So it's very important that folks understand their role. And so that's why we think strategically about development within organizations and working with them and produce. And then we walk folks along that whole journey. So that's the type of consultation and training that we offer within the Center for Public Health Practice.
Thank you all for all of that. I will try to speak slowly because I also have a tendency to talk very quickly. So in regards to workplace development at the University of Florida Library, so some of the things that recently that we've done in regards to the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Aubrey Ahmaud is that there was shut down academia that was created, and the University of Florida participated in that, as well as Academics for Black Lives, Survival, and Wellness. So that being able to have that space and taking that time to participate in events like this with the shutdown academia was a time to stop doing work and reflect on what has happened and that this country is doing what it's intended to do, and that it is something that people have to be aware of and understand. And then the Academic for Black Lives, Survival, and Wellness was geared to Black folks in academia, but also others in learning how can you support them. And that was one that several people in the libraries had the opportunity and the space and the permission to participate in, which is something that is great. Because some people have to understand that learning is still a part that you're still doing something. Learning is an action. Okay, and so that we can't all jump to anti-racism when we fully haven't understood, what American racism is like here and being able to strip that apart. And so it's being uncomfortable to the point sometimes that you're going to be painful. It's going to be painful. But it's about us, doing the right thing instead of saying the right thing. I know that there's a lot of people who are concerned about not, being considered racist or anything like that, but it's being able to look at focusing on your actions. Okay, what is it that we need to be doing? And so some of the other things that the institution has done is have people attend different library conferences for librarians of color. So like the Joint Conference of Librarians of Color, which is going to be occurring in 2022. And other conferences before that, they have made available funding for particularly staff of color to attend, and other staff to attend conferences like that, as well as with the hiring. Since I've started, I've had individual consultations with people and basically meeting people where they are. So that's one of the things that I've been trying to do, is to create space, hold space, a non-judgmental space at that for people to engage in this work. But understanding that we have to figure out what is our baseline? What is our baseline and where do we go from here? But what do we hope to do? So I will leave it there.
I love that. And if you've talked to me in the last 2 weeks, I recently watched Avatar: The Last Airbender for the first time. And if you haven't watched it, definitely watch it on YouTube. But and one of the episodes, there's a line in it that like really just shook me to my core, especially as it relates to equity, as it relates to justice. And it's, you can't bend anyone's energy unless you are sure of your own energy, otherwise it will destroy you. And so that idea of you have to know who you are, what you're committed to, what you're willing to risk to get to that thing, and how you can be steady in that before you try and shift an organization, before you try and shift a society. And so I really appreciate you speaking to that. I saw a question in the chat around it, and this is one of the questions I had as well. How have you all built buy-in around your efforts, whether that be buy-in from coworkers, buy-in from staff, buy-in from leadership, buy-in from your governing bodies, buy-in from your customers, or all of it? How have you continuously buy-in and ensured that those being most impacted were having a voice in the work that you're trying to do or are doing?
With me, I'm a strong believer in a collective impact. And I've done this work within communities and working with community. And it's really ensuring that you intentionally create the space for all these different folks to engage in the discussion. Like I said, when we created and formed our Inclusive Excellence Committee at the Colorado School of Public Health, the first thing I said, well, if I'm chairing it, executive leadership has to be there. Decision makers have to be on board. So all the associate deans need, and not to say that they didn't want to participate. So let me say that. They wanted to participate, but I wanted to make sure all of them wanted to participate. Because sometimes you're just mobilizing with the choir. And I appreciate the choir. I love, but we need to expand our choir for other folks. And so those accountability measures are key. In addition to this, I want to make sure faculty, staff, and students were all, and we create a vision together to really mobilize around a vision. And like with Collective, you have a shared vision, you move forward. But in addition to that, I can't stress this more. I didn't get on board until my dean said, I will support the work of the committee. So we regularly present to the executive committee our reports, what's going on, what's not working. And so it's really ensuring that the leadership body supports, because you need to be able to do this work, that we're making some progress. And even with this structure, we still, from the beginning, I said it was still rough. Even with this structure, it's taken us 3 years. And I think now we're finally ready to put some teeth on our, to really move forward and advance equity. So it takes time, but it's ensuring that you mobilize the right people at the table and create mechanisms for accountability.
I will just echo that completely, and also really re-emphasize that it's not just top down. That is very important, because if the decision makers are not at the table or at the picnic basket or at the whatever you're doing this at, then nothing is going to change. And I love, Cerise, your emphasis on not only getting kind of the rubber stamp box check from your dean or from that kind of C-suite, but that you are actively engaging the members of leadership. And then underscoring also the importance of making it from the grassroots up as well. So not only that the leadership is bought in and engaged, but that you are talking through assessments and processes that are going to work throughout the entire organization, and not just through the staff, but on down through whomever those beneficiaries, constituents, whomever those people are that are the kind of recipients of the work. So I think engaging folks at all levels is incredibly important. A couple of other things that we focus on. One is we don't start any equity work with clients or with partners until we have a clear understanding of what their why is. And I think especially right now in our current environment where equity is a huge buzzword, we are getting, the phone is ringing off the hook all of a sudden for organizations that want equity assessments and impact assessments and all of these things. And that is wonderful, as long as it is authentic and as long as it is coming from a true desire to commit to and make change, and a willingness to have those really hard conversations. Because even organizations that really think they are knocking equity out of the park in a good way, there are always places for us to go. And like Cerise was saying, it's not even a journey, it's like a freaking roller coaster. And sometimes you are coming up over that crest and it's like, oh my gosh, and then things just start happening. And so making sure that we understand the why, making sure that we are clear on the outcome so that we can then create authentic buy-in that really gets people on board. The other thing that we really focus on, and Cerise, I love your energy around this, and all the panelists, I love all of our energy around this, because this work is hard, but if it's not also fun and light, it's never gonna work. And so whether that means finding those small wins and those small celebrations that you can take on, when all of a sudden every member of your staff has their pronouns in their Zoom name, great, that's a huge win, that's a big step. Making sure that you are acknowledging and celebrating those small wins, and also remembering to bring breath and lightness into this work so that it's not all just about this long, devastating trudge through equity work. So kind of finding that balance to make sure that folks can stay really actively engaged.
So I would like to add to that. So with me being really new to this work, kind of being in a formal position where I'm focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion, for 40 hours a week, and only doing this for 5 months itself, I was kind of just like anxious about preparing for this presentation because like all of these other panelists are amazing. I've been doing this work for like a really long time, and they're going to have so many nuggets of wisdom. And in regards to this question, I'm in the process of mobilizing people and building buy-in. One of the things that I've been doing is, and as a part of my onboarding and orientation in this position, and that onboarding and orientation doesn't just stop after the first week or after the first month. For me, I believe it's something that is ongoing, or at least it's there for at least 6 months or a year, especially in brand new positions, and especially if people are looking to create a position that has the words diversity, equity, and inclusion in the title, and that person is new to the organization or new to that institution, being able to provide them with the support system necessary and the time that's required to learn the organizational culture. And to figure out who are the allies and accomplices and liberators that is going to help them in this work. From, in this case, since I work at an academic institution, from student employees to administration, as well as people outside of the library system. And so I've been meeting with people who are willing to meet with me. And as I build my program, I want it to be reflective of the needs and the wants of the people employed at the library, which is 280 something people. And so that's a lot of people that I hope to meet with over the course of the time that I'm here with. But one of the things that I've also been doing is just meeting people where they are, as you all have said. Because there are some people who are on the radical side of things who, want to dismantle white supremacy, who is already doing the work, who's already creating equitable, inclusive workspaces and places for patrons. But there are other people who may not understand, why diversity equals our survival. And one of the things that I've just trying to do is focusing on making sure that people can come to work as they want to show up. So they don't have to be invited. I hate the table analogy. It's like, if somebody has to be invited, there's still the power dynamics that's involved there. Somebody still has to say, hey, you come, you're invited to this table. So, working towards how can people show up the way that they want to show up in with their authentic self. And so that's something that I've been kind of thinking about and working on, and utilizing the power of the people who've been doing this work, and also connecting it to the mission, vision, goals, and strategic directions of my library, as well as the University of Florida.
Awesome. Thank you all. I cannot believe we're running out of time already. I do want to give us one last question because it did come up, and it was one of the ones I had as well. How does your organization fund this work and sustain funding to continue this work? Is equity built into your budget? And for organizations who might not have the budget for it, what advice could you offer about being able to help support these efforts financially?
I can start. We need to do more work around carving out budget, but we have prioritized this and moved money around so that we could fund training, so that we could find new positions to focus on this work. And that's hard. We all know that that means stopping something else. So I think just acknowledging that that's a piece of this. We also have been advocating for funding from the city, and we've been going after grant money, this symposium being part of that, but also in some other ways. So any way that we can find money right now to support this, we're going to do, including rearranging some things.
Yeah, I struggle. I know the financial component is a reality within organizations, but it really hurts me because we find money for the things that we prioritize. We've all seen this within organizations, how this person's let go and we're having a hiring freeze, but yet we see 2 more people get hired in that process. So it's important to ensure that when you're embarking in this work, that equity, diversity and inclusion is a priority, as Michelle stated. And then also doing what you can with the resources. And a way to demonstrate that it needs to be a priority is assessments. Can you conduct a climate survey? Do you have an evaluation team that can do some sort of climate survey? Because if if folks engage in a survey that says they're not satisfied, we need more around equity, diversity, inclusion, that might push the priority up a little more. Also, strategic planning is also a good way to move. However, I know with strategic plans, we like to have the EDI plan in one little page on page 25. It's usually at page 25 too. We have the EDI plan. But with that, we want to make sure the EDI is embedded in all aspects, because if we can get EDI infused, and so making sure that leaders learn about the significance. So like for my school, EDI needs to be in research. EDI is embedded in our student life. EDI is embedded in our academics. EDI, everyone sees the role of why it needs to be. In addition to, we still have that one page for EDI, but it's infused within. So those are some things that can begin the conversation, but then mobilizing your allies, the folks who are in this, to see how can we collectively do this work together and really have a strategy. Strategy is key.
So initially I was going to skip over this question in terms of they're funding me in terms of my position in terms of focusing on this, but in regards to Dr. Hunt, what you were saying in terms of it has to be it has to be interwoven into anything. It is not a luxury, it's an option. We don't get to opt out anymore. We've done this before, and I think that's why we are facing what we're facing in this moment. It's for people to understand that the Constitution needed amendments. There needed to be laws put in place. There needed to be civil rights and movements happening, to just fight for human rights for all, and that's still not the case in 2020. And so for people to understanding, like Michelle said, in terms of if we're funding one thing, we're not funding another thing. And so we have to be intentional about where the money goes. If you have a budget and you have a diversity committee, do they have a budget? Do they have funding? If you don't have a diversity committee and you maybe have someone who's doing this work, are they being fairly compensated for this work? Because there's been a lot of people who've been doing this work for a long time, and they have not been compensated for it. So what are you doing to rectify even just that? So because when we think about equity, and then when we even think about racial equity, a lot of the times we're doing this work as Black, Indigenous, people of color, and for me, I tell folks that we're doing this work, but dismantling white supremacy is not the role of people of color, and understanding what does that mean, and what does that look like, and understanding that if you, as somebody had said, if you care about something, see where the money goes. The money, the budget shows what people find that is important. And so if this is something that we are intentional about, that we want to go beyond just statements and messages, where the month of June was just nonstop statements and messages galore, we have to figure out, what are we willing to sacrifice? And what are we willing to even at times incentivize people? What are we doing to require this? Because if you're just self-selecting, then it might be the same people that is showing up time and time again. And so it's having the conversation about what is going to work for, being located at a predominantly white institution in the South. And that might be different than an institution located in the Pacific Northwest, because there's a lot of different cultural norms, even just historical norms that influence this. And even thinking about that intergenerational and historical and current trauma, where people don't trust institutions. Even libraries have a lot of work that they need to do.
The only thing that I'll add, I mean, thank you all for those perspectives. I think they're super right on. And I love the kind of bringing in this perspective on how and why and who dismantles white supremacy. We are in a unique position in our work. Again, like I said, working with nonprofits and philanthropy, it is my belief and our company's belief that the nonprofit industrial complex, if you will, was formed on the backs of the white supremacist philanthropic situation. And so there's a lot to dismantle in both of these worlds that we live in. And one of the, whatever you can assign a positive or negative byproduct of our current social situation is that philanthropy is feeling a little bit of guilt right now, and that shows up often in a redirection of funding, which is incredibly frustrating at times, but can really work in our favor when it's for things like an emphasis on equity, diversity, and inclusion type work. So I encourage organizations that are listening right now, if you don't know whether your agency or your organization or your company have a budget for JEDI work, there's a lot of money coming out of philanthropy right now, very founded in white supremacy guilt, which is wonderful. So go ahead, let's redirect it into this good work. Call Dr. Hunt, have her come out and do some work with you. Call me, call us, we'll come work with you. There's good money flowing right now in the world for equity work. And so yes, again, it's like put your money where your mouth is, and it's happening in bits. So we see that a lot of our clients are getting funding either through philanthropic partners or boards of directors that have all of a sudden awakened to the fact that the board of directors might not mirror the population being served. And as such, it's time for the board of directors to engage in some more of this thoughtful work, which often has money associated with it. So a lot of times boards of directors are also stepping up to fund or to create line items for organizations when it comes to this equity work. So lots of ways to do it. Don't let money be a barrier. I know it feels like it, but there are ways to get this work to happen with you, for you, in your agencies. So you just got to find it.
Thank you all. I saw a couple questions around accountability and assessment. Day 3 is going to be geared towards a deeper conversation around how do organizations hold themselves accountable and what do some assessments look like. I will post in the chat the one and I'll talk more about it on day 3, but the one that we have used or we were using for our environmental scan, and it is an equity, diversity, and inclusion organizational scan. And so it looks at how EDI is embedded into your organization. So it's a Qualtrics survey. So if you would like to just scroll through it to see what it looks like and all of those things, that is available there. But the last question that I will ultimately leave you all with, that also is in our question and answer, is what has been the biggest barrier to this work for you and your organization, and how did you struggle through those barriers, and what supports were the most helpful for you?
I'll start. This is not easy. So I think the biggest barrier is that this is really hard. I mean, we're talking about dismantling hundreds of years of institutional and systemic racism. So how do you persevere through that? You start, you prioritize it, and you start. And I think that starting is, learning, but then taking that learning and putting it into action. I think for our organization, we've had a lot of good intentions. We've done a lot. It's been disjointed, and it needs better coordination, and we need a level of expertise that we haven't had. But we've identified a way to move forward, and I couldn't be more excited about that.
Just watching for who's going to unmute. Okay, I guess I will share. I think for us, what we experience primarily in our work with our clients is honestly, and Ozzy brought this up in the welcome session, but we exist in this very hidden world of pervasive white supremacy culture. And even when we don't acknowledge that that's where and how we are showing up, it's how we are kind of indoctrined to show up. And so when I say white supremacy culture, what comes into my head are the kind of qualities of white supremacy culture that come up through showing up for racial justice. And they include things like a focus on perfectionism, an emphasis on urgency and getting things done now, defensiveness, putting quantity over quality, a fear of open conflict, individualism, these things that really get in the way of making progress. And so I think for us, what we see is those things show up, right? Our clients want to get it right. They want to do it perfectly, but they also want to do it right now. And those are qualities of white supremacy culture that get in the way of progress towards justice. So I think for us, it's the barriers are very grounded in the problem that we are trying to solve. And so that's kind of how we experience it. In terms of what have been supports for us, compassion and a willingness to really show up and try, and finding ways to dismantle some of those qualities of white supremacy culture. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, it won't be. You're gonna mess up. I'm gonna mess up. We're all gonna mess up. We do it all the time. But being compassionate with yourself, being compassionate with your progress, being compassionate with that change has been a huge support for us. The other thing that we work on a lot within our own work at Point D and our work with our clients is allowing and encouraging ourselves and our clients to focus on the process, not just the outcome. So we want to know the why so that we can clarify those outcomes. And also, until we can kind of start working through that roller coaster of the process, those outcomes are going to keep being out of reach. So it's more important for us to focus on the process and the journey and kind of laying slow groundwork that we build on bit by bit. And those have been some of the things that really lead to increased supports for us and higher success rates, honestly, with the work that we're doing inside and outside our walls.
Thank you. I know within one of the biggest barriers is when we're, for so many years in doing equity work, it's been just talk and surface. So there hasn't been, because folks have been doing this work for years. Now, when you reach that mark where you're about to make that change, that it's getting real, the biggest barrier are folks that start resisting the change process. Because it's not real until folks are, when we talk about dismantling white supremacy, folks are going to lose some of their privileges that, as Bobby has stated, they were born with for generations. And now we're going to start losing. And then, oh no, we can't hire. What do you mean hire and I have to give up this? That's when it gets real. And that's been my biggest barrier. The way that I have tried to overcome that, because that was a new revelation, because I was like, well, you know, when you get to that point that people actually want to change, so working with organizations doing the work. So as I'm embarking in this journey and we're seeing change, now I'm thinking ahead, what would be some of those barriers to change? Who may resist the change process, and thinking ahead of the game. So being proactive in my strategy to kind of get an idea who's kind of not engaged in the discussion and find out why. So if there's someone that I know that's kind of checked out, I'm going to reach out to them, because I was like, I can't, you know, a year from now, I can't have you shooting, you know, darts at my plan and trying to tear it down. I need to know up front. So just know who you're working with, know your organization.
Not only who's the least engaged, but who has the most to lose. Because they are going to be, that's going to be the biggest factor. They're going to be the ones that might come out as, yes, we've got this. And then as soon as it starts to impact. So yes, echo all that.
Just to add to that, I would say being conflict averse. So, you know, there are some people who do want to engage in conflict or having challenging, difficult, controversial conversations. And engaging, understanding that conflict is not a bad thing, and kind of like having that capability to engage in those difficult and challenging conversations that I think the world is having and has been having for the last 6 weeks or last since 2020, to be honest. And I think it's also within the realm of librarianship, there's this concept of vocational awe. So it describes a set of ideas, values, and assumptions that library employees have about themselves and the profession. And I'm going to just kind of copy and post that into the chat box. And this was an article written by Fabazi Itar, and it is something that where people hold the librarianship profession, themselves in the profession, as inherently good, sacred, that the library is inherently good, sacred notions, and therefore beyond critique. You know, and so it's, you know, really taking a critical lens to ourselves, and really saying that we, libraries traditionally have not always welcomed everyone. You know, segregation what existed. You know, when we think about providing equitable service policies, equitable service, and having equitable policies, you know, what does that mean? What does equity mean? Equity is being able to provide tailored services to someone, not equality, which is treating everyone the same. You know, and so people to understand, you know, the differences between that and even liberation, to talk about the myth of meritocracy or the bootstrap narrative. You know, so there's a lot of things that has to be brought to the surface and talked about first, you know, before we can leap to the other side. Because there's a lot of unlearning or re-education that needs to occur. And also talking about having a savior complex, you know, because I'm not here to save anyone. You know, my goal is to do the job that I've been hired here to do, but to know that I'm not going to be the only one doing it. And it's just working with people, meeting, like I said before, meeting them where they are. Like Dr. Hunt said, you know, finding the people who might be the ones wanting to like throw a dart or dynamite or grenade, you know, at the plans further in the future. But also identifying support systems. So in terms of like doing this work, not doing it alone, because there's a lot of people who is watching, who's in attendance, who have helped to keep me in this profession and keep me doing the job that I'm doing. And so for me, I've kind of prioritized self-preservation, self-care, and self-advocacy as ways of, you know, doing this work day in and day out.
Thank you all so much. Someone asked a question about the questions that have been coming in through Q&A. We've been putting those in a document, and I've been trying to at least summarize the ones and group together the ones that folks could respond to. Obviously, we don't have enough time, even though I could sit with these folks in front of me for hours and learn more about what they have to share. So I am deeply sorry to those of you whose questions were unanswered. I'm going to try to look through them and make sure that if those questions are relevant to a different panel, for instance, the accountability and assessment panel, that those questions are answered there. That is the wrap up of this session. Feel free to hang out with each other in the virtual networking space, where you can engage in deeper conversations around what came up for you all. Again, thank you for showing up for this conversation, and I look forward to connecting with some of you again later on this afternoon. So take care.
Thank you all.
Thank you for joining.
Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Take care all.